Okay, well, hi everyone. I don't have anybody in the waiting room, so I think we could probably get started. Um, First, just kind of, sorry, couple things just to get started. If I look to the side, I'm not ignoring you. I'm probably still speaking. I've got my all my documents over here on my other monitor, so I'm looking to the side a little bit for that. If everybody hasn't heard it yet, if you can mute your mic if you're not talking, that would be great, especially if you have some background noise. If you want to say something, you can raise your hand. There's a little button on your controller or your app to do that, or you can just unmute and speak up with your questions. I don't mind questions in the middle of this presentation while we're going. That'd probably be the easiest way since we'll be hitting on a few different topics. Um, and if for some reason you speak up or something, I don't catch you or something like that, go ahead and hit that raise your hand button. I do encourage you to ask questions. The information I have, I think most of you know, so it's going to be fairly simple, but I was hoping to answer questions for all of you guys. I think it's valuable for you to hear what other people are asking because it can inform your decisions moving forward. It also will be used by me to kind of gauge where you guys are at. So when I'm talking to different jurisdictions or stuff, just to kind of know what you're seeing on the ground. Some of the jurisdictions we're working with are not being very reactive, not getting back to people or communicating. The only communications they have is with you guys directly on your job sites or by emails that I do not see. So I think this is probably more of a learning opportunity for me than for you guys to some extent. So I just want to introduce a few people when we start. Obviously, I'm Ryan McKinster. I'm your Government Affairs Director here at BIA. I also have Avalee Scarpelli on. She's our Executive Director. Danielle, who is our Events Director. I believe Andrea Smith, who is our Communications and Program Manager, is on as well. And I also have our Board President, Dave Millimaki, and a bunch of other board members on. As well as Jamie Housley, my predecessor and a lawyer with Jordan Ramus. He's been really active in all of our efforts to get us at least back to work in some semblance, as well as working some channels with the governor's office to try to get a solution at that level. Before I kind of jump into the quick governor update, Jamie, is there anything you wanted to add, or Avalee, or Dave?
None for me at this time. I'm just most interested in answering questions for people and getting an update.
Okay. Dave or Avalee, is there anything you wanted to add before I roll right into it?
We want to hear what our governor has to say.
Okay. Well, that's great. I guess I can speak to that. He hasn't had a lot to say. Just to start out, to give you kind of a framework, if you're not kind of been following along, which I know you're following along very closely on some of this stuff, but one of the things is the governor's been having press conferences every couple days, and those are how he communicates. He is not distributing, and his office is not distributing much direction outside of his press conferences. When he has released like any of the documents, including clarifying documents or executive orders or amending them, it's been at a press conference, a presser. So that's kind of how we find stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have anything for the most part outside of those, except for some stuff that people are working on. Some people on this call might be able to speak to that. So you guys are all aware, I'm sure, that the governor's order has been extended to May 4th. We are currently working to see if we can put a solution in front of the governor that he is willing to accept. The governor has kind of offered, I think you guys know, there's a list of essential workers or essential services that we are mentioned in, but it's pretty exclusive to emergency work, working on a few other items. Or there's one that actually some of our jurisdictions are taking advantage is you're doing construction that basically affects anybody else that's listed as an essential industry or essential worker. I will talk about that more when we get down to local jurisdictions, but having said that, the governor is kind of giving a lot of leeway to local jurisdictions. As some of you are aware, some of our jurisdictions are taking the letter of the executive order and the essential workers document to the letter. They are not supposing anything. They are not extrapolating. They are not even choosing to attempt to define some of the undefined terms in there. I'm sure many of you have heard of the spoliation issue, the clause or the exemption. Jamie has also provided some legal guidance, a memo at least about how that kind of translates. But that kind of is where it's at. Obviously, some of our jurisdictions have taken that and run with it, and some have chosen not to. Unfortunately, it's a gray area, and those jurisdictions that are only going what's explicitly stated are basically saying there's no definitions for spoliation, so we are not really going to address that. That's pretty much where the governor sits. We don't have any more information except the fact that Jamie and I, Tracy is on as well. I mean, Aveley's been involved in many of these conversations with us locally, as well as our local elected officials at the state level. Mainly, our big advocates have been Annette Cleveland and Linda Wilson with the governor's office, but putting together a solution. Basically, many of you have seen the BIAW list of best practices. And the solution is basically making a commitment to LNI, Department of Health, and the governor saying these are best practices, we recognize that, and we are willing to commit to these. Whatever that commitment and that form takes, we're willing to do it. And that's a solution that's been put out there. BIAW, along with Tracy, who's on this call, and some others, have been actively meeting with the governor. Actual real active meetings started beginning of last week, or actually maybe the Friday before that. There's a stakeholder group that is made up of BIAW, AGC, ABC, some of the state labor council. So basically it's merit shops and trade shop unions all in the same room, commercial, residential, industrial, all discussing how we can get back to work. It is not moving as fast as we would like, especially I'm sure how you guys would like, but I'm happy that there's forward progress from everybody that's been involved, including Greg, our executive vice president, BIAW, said it's moving forward, and they are hopeful that we're going to see something soon. Not as soon as we like, of course, but I believe they have a meeting again today, and it's right now it looks like 2 or 3 meetings a week with those groups, and there has been some forward progress and some compromises made along those lines. One of the biggest issues is educating the governor's office and staff on the fact that residential and commercial are much different job sites, that residential has the ability to conform very well to the best practices that are laid out by CDC as well as the state health department. So that's where we sit. Like I said, there's not been a lot of back and forth. There's not been a lot of information from the governor's office per se, except for this working group. I would like to open up to questions, but first, if Tracy or Aveley would like to speak anything to that, they both have been involved, and I think both of them may have been a little closer to that. I know Tracy has than I have been on some of these discussions.
Well, I can speak a little bit about that. The negotiations with that group of folks involved some stakeholders, and the problematic folks, of course, are labor. Labor kind of is the group that kind of pushed Inslee over the edge to put this construction moratorium in place in the first place. So they're kind of been the problem children that they've been dealing with. And so we've been working through that particular aspect. As we all know, when Inslee gets pushed into a corner, which we do because we don't play his reindeer games and we push back, he acts a little bit like a petulant child and gives us the beat down. So beat down. To that extent, here we are. But we will continue to push back. And of course, we lead our message with the whole safety issue that we know how to do these things safely through BIAW and, of course, NHB. We've set up some protocols that can make this safe. And we keep telling the story on and on that our people working individually, as a lot of tradesmen do, are safer there than they are at home. So that continues to be that particular narrative. And, I assure you that we're working every back channel. We've got Kathy McMorris Rogers, and we've got Dan Newhouse working with us as well. They are really good industry advocates. And after all, how could a guy with the last name Newhouse not be a great industry advocate for new houses? So great to have those folks on our team. And then, of course, we've got, all our Southwest Washington legislators have been chiming in. So that, to a point, seems to be falling on deaf ears. So we will kind of see how it goes. We have not created any hot spots with residential construction, so Inslee can't point to any of our groups saying, hey, look at what happened. These guys went to work against my orders, and now we've got a problem. So kudos to everybody that's done their part to make sure that everybody's safe out there. And that's the way we have to keep moving this process forward. As I've driven around to our job sites just to check on security, I noticed there are, some of the bad actors that are continuing to run active job sites, and, they're in doing tile work and all sorts of things, which we all know is probably a safe thing to do, but it's against the order of some of these jurisdictions. Camas in particular was the place I noticed this yesterday. So we don't want to push these guys over the edge and get them to do a hard beat down on it again. So that's kind of what I know. I know that Greg and his crew met through the weekend and again yesterday, and I have not had a download of that conversation yet today. So when I find out anything, I'll be sure and forward that to you.
Thanks, Tracy. And there's one thing I wanted to add along those lines. We are not alone in this fight. I meet with a group of other GADs every morning, and we have this. They're working actively. Clark County has sent a letter, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, to the governor asking for us to be considered essential. There is many jurisdictions, counties, and cities across the state that are asking for that. So we're not on the island. I'm sure you guys would expect that we wouldn't be, but I just want to assure you that there's been a very strong effort statewide. We're not going this alone, although I believe Clark County has been one of the louder, more proactive voices recently, the last few weeks. But yeah, there is a groundswell. And so at this point, the pressure is on the governor. It is just getting, I think, some of these moving pieces in, or as Tracy mentioned, some of the resistance we have from the labor unions. We have to address those or get through those. So it would be more of a political play rather than the basically loud support. I believe we have that. I'm sure the governor is very, very aware. I'm saying that for one reason, because it's kind of a good segue after, I want to do a quick Q&A, but after that's a good segue into the locals, because I think that's where our emphasis should be at this time until we get more movement or more direction from the governor. Before we get into that, though, I just wanted to ask, throw it out there. If anybody has any questions regarding the governor's order or where we sit with that, for myself or Jamie or possibly Tracy, does anybody have those? You can raise your little hand on the app or just turn your mic on and speak up. Okay. Well, in that case, I guess we'll move on to local jurisdictions. As Tracy mentioned, obviously, I want to start out with what Tracy mentioned and reiterate that we really need to be careful. We should not be violating the governor's order, especially in the local jurisdictions that are being more prescriptive in their reading of the governor's order for one main reason. I know you guys are probably not part of the problem, but if you know someone that's kind of out there and if you could put a little pressure on them, I would really appreciate it. That could serve to hurt us very drastically in the conversations that are happening with the governor. Defying an order and then coming back for it and asking for permission or forgiveness in this case is probably not a good thing for us. So we really need to be very careful with that, especially with the local jurisdictions, because they have a lot of control in this, how they interpret the governor's order. And we're working with them to get some changes, but that could be put some pushback there. But I wanted to start out with Ridgefield, who is, one of our shining stars, I guess. Steve has worked very closely with Jamie on some actual language on the legal side. I have worked with Steve closely on some of these things. That would probably be, the fact is he is a friend of the industry. He works with us closely on everything and always gives us a heads up if something's gonna happen that could be detrimental to us as well. And so I think that is kind of the reason we got where we're at with him. But if you don't know, Ridgefield is allowing construction continue to avoid spoliation, which basically to avoid damage. You can't complete houses under that, but you can go ahead and get it to a button-up or a weathered-in place, roofing. And Ridgefield, I actually appreciate, although it's more prescriptive, he gives a list in that order of what you can and can't, or what you can do. So it gets rid of a lot of the gray area. And so if anything's on that order, you're more than welcome to do that to get to a point of, protecting and securing your site. In addition to that, he has also found a very good, or Jamie and Steve found a very nuanced, not loophole, a nuanced way of interpreting. Because the essential worker document allows you to work, build construction for any of the other to support any of the other people that are named essential workers or industry. If you are working in Ridgefield and you are building a house, it's a pre-sale. It had to be signed before, I believe, March 26th. I don't have it right in front of me. I will send out a link, a little email to all of you guys with all these links as well. So yeah, if you've had it, then and one of the owners is, and it's got to be approved. You have to fill out a little affidavit or a little form that they are an essential worker under one of the other designations of essential worker. You can construct that house to completion. They will perform the inspections needed to get you all the way to certificate of occupancy for those people. So that's a good thing. Some people have asked why more people are not doing that, or why we can do them safely, why we can't do others. The governor's order does not allow you to do others. This is a legal way to do it under the governor's order without violating that order, because municipalities and jurisdictions cannot violate the governor's order. So that's kind of where that stands. I'm going to go into Battleground real quick, and then I can answer some questions, because Battleground is basically following the lead of Ridgefield as well. You can build to avoid spoliation. They do not have a list of types of building you can do, siding or shear walls or stuff like that. That's actually listed in Ridgefield. So they just say you can do it to get to the weathered in stage, basically. So there is gray area there. What I've recommended a few people that have called me, is I have recommended you look at the order that Ridgefield is using, the terms they're using, and you're probably on pretty good legal ground. I mean, not legal advice, but you're probably in a pretty good place if you're going to follow that. I know Battleground has actually, they basically decided to follow in Ridgefield's footsteps. So even though they do not state what you can and can't do, I would say the Ridgefield order is a pretty good rule of thumb. I must highlight, though, that both jurisdictions, you have to get pre-approval. You can't just go back to your site. There's some documentation you have to provide for them, why you're doing what you're doing, why it falls under whatever oil order, whether it's damage or whether it's to complete a house for another industry, essentially a recognized essential industry. In addition to that, there's an affidavit that you have to have signed for I believe both, regarding if you're going to go to completion for an essential worker. It's basically saying, here's a legal document saying these people are essential. And actually, I was going to let Jamie speak. Jamie's been very actively involved in this too, and so he may be able to speak some. Actually, Chuck has a question. Hey, Chuck.
I don't have a question. Actually, I've applied for 3 of them to continue in Ridgefield. I just provided an email, nothing signed document, with pay stubs from the buyers, and that they work for an essential business. One of them they work for the bank. Another one, they're both in the armed forces, and the other one is works for Granite Construction, that does road work and stuff.
Great.
They all 3 qualified to.
Great. That's great to hear.
I've already gotten the okay from Steve Stewart. Steve Stewart turned it around within a couple hours, said that we're good to go to finish the houses. One house is at hard surfaces. The other one is like 2 weeks from being finished. We've got our electrical final on it. We just got to get the occupancy. And we're continuing on with those 3 houses, but the rest of them are all standing still. We're just weathering them in.
Great. Well, I appreciate that, Chuck, because that's the first response. I know you're all busy, and I don't expect you to drop everything to let me know, but I appreciate to hear about some successes. So I was going to let it go to Jamie if he had any words about what's going on in those 2 jurisdictions.
No, the only thing I would say is, again, as Ryan had indicated, we're working very closely with Steve. I think he's kind of on the leading edge in the state in terms of being one of the first jurisdictions to provide written guidance, as well as this new interpretation that we worked on last week. So we're hopeful that we can use his good framework and springboard that into other jurisdictions locally, and if not, take it to some other jurisdictions around the state, and hopefully they will take that guidance under advisement. Steve is in a little bit of a unique circumstances that he does have a a law degree. He has actually passed the bar. So he not only is the city manager, but also likes to play city attorney sometimes, which is easy for me to have a conversation with him in that regard.
Yeah. So along those lines, real quick too, what Jamie mentioned, I have spoken closely, and I work closely, like I mentioned, with my other GADs across the state, and they have a copy of these too, and they are taking these and are using these as documents to go to their councils. There's a lot of other councils, whether city or county, that are in kind of the same mind frame or mindset that Steve is, and they're trying to move forward with construction. Usually falls along the lines of rural rather than more of the urban environments, but they're working on too. So that's really good, and it's great to see that, us down here in Clark County, and Steve especially is kind of being the model resolution for other states to go. So eventually it could be a groundswell where that's where everybody goes, and it's just inevitable for everybody to follow along. Along those lines, Clark County is in a similar vein. They basically allow everybody to build to spoliation, to deal with damage and weathering in and stuff along those lines. That also requires you to send if you go to the website, I think there's actually I'll tell you, go to our website, BIA of ClarkCounty.org, and there's a COVID-19 link. Andrea has created a page that collates all this information, whether it's from BIAW or the individual jurisdictions. It's a great resource. I can tell you, looking at these other jurisdictions as well as BIAW, it's a little difficult sometimes to find stuff, but Andrea's put it all in one page that's easily readable. You can scroll through it and pretty much find all the stuff. We update it regularly during the day. As soon as I get something or she gets something, it goes up there. So just a little interjection there. But Clark County is also coming along and coming on board and letting you guys at least protect your property for security as well as weather. Before we get into the other jurisdictions that are not as liberal in their interpretations, are there any questions on those?
Yeah, Ryan, I do have one question. Were you indicating that Battleground has jumped on board with the essential worker verbiage that Ridgefield came out with on Thursday?
I believe they do have that. They have the affidavit. I think it was Thursday or Friday that they provided that information that you can sign an affidavit for that. So yeah, Battleground is in the same boat.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, if you go to the BIA site and click the COVID link there, and then you click on Battleground, it takes you to a page and it actually has that document on the PDF right there. You can fill it out and then send it to them. Any other questions before we carry on? Okay, we'll go over a couple more, and then I left Camus for the end because I'm sure you guys probably have questions or concerns. We may want to talk about that more. So Vancouver has been somewhat silent. They have not updated any of their websites or their documentation. I've spoken to a few of our builders that are active in Vancouver. They have not gotten direction. Some of them have gone directly to Vancouver ComDev and asked for OKs to continue, and that has happened on some of them. It's a project by project basis. They have not created a format or a type of framework for doing that. They don't have anything about it, so we're kind of stuck there. Having said that, I am working with Councilor Bart Hansen on this. Have provided him examples, including Battleground, Clark County, as well as Ridgefield. Also, there's some other examples from around the state that I have gotten from my fellow GADs. He has those in hand. He was going to work with Eric, the city manager, and basically say point blank, what of these can we adopt and what can we do? I'm hoping to hear back from him today on how that's turned out. If not, I'm going to follow up with him tomorrow. But he's trying to get Vancouver to go down that road as well. I do have a quick question for everybody on here before I move on. If you do build in Vancouver, I just got a couple emails this morning that they saw a bunch of people doing commercial work in Vancouver today and residential work, and I have not received any notice. I have not had any response back from them. I do not know of anything that they have sent out, but a lot of times they will send emails directly to permit holders without sending it to me. So is anybody working in Vancouver, and have they heard anything of this?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try to chase down that rumor and see what's happening on that. I just found out about that right before this call, so I will let you guys know how that comes out. La Center is basically stop. They're basically similar to Washougal and Camas, and said, basically there's pretty much nothing, moves forward at this time. They are not being very responsive at all. On the other hand, they aren't normally anyways. They're such a small municipality and small staff. I'm still trying to figure out what they're doing, but I know that unless you are explicitly defined in the governor's order, they are not letting you continue work. As soon as I get a communication line with them, we're going to try to get them to adopt the viewpoints that Ridgefield, Battleground, and Clark have, but that's still an ongoing process. Washougal is the same. They basically said, no more building unless you're explicitly designated in the governor's order. At the Washougal City Council last night, Mayor Colton said that she referenced Clark County's effort to get us working and all the problems with it. The loss of income, the loss of jobs, the fact that people aren't going there. So I know the mayor she made sure to emphasize that kind of when they did their around the horn at the end of the council meeting. I'm going to reach out to her today to see how much she is willing to push that, to see if we can get a resolution drafted over there and dropped, because she was obviously on our side, and they have been. I haven't worked with them that closely. I believe Danielle has for the parade, but every time I've called over there or helped with anything, they've been very reactive or proactive. So we're trying to chase that down, especially now that we have a advocate over there in the mayor. The final one is Camas. I know a lot of you are working at Camas. It's very frustrating. I think it has been frustrating for years for some of you. I know I've had my issues over there, certain council meetings, but we're working on it very, very well. I know Jamie is trying to work close. I'll hand over to him in a second. He's working closely over there to try to see if there's any leeway or some solutions we can come to. I can tell you one thing, over in Camas, basically the police are showing up and asking you to step off the site. That's how they're enforcing it, which is basically enforcing the governor's order. It's not a workaround like the health department or, permitting or something like that. They're enforcing the governor's order itself. So if you're on site over there and they ask you to leave, you need to leave. They're not going to bust you the first time. They're going to give you a warning. Hey, they may even give you 2 warnings, but after that, you will start to lose permits. If it's egregious enough, you will get referred to the Attorney General's office for further action. So please recognize and be very polite if the police come up, and we want to be good neighbors over there. Having said that, after working back and forth and kind of getting the runaround, I'm not sure if Jamie's gotten it. I have gotten it. Finally, point blank was said, the mayor, who we do not have a relationship with, is very new and is new to the world of management and this stuff, has basically directed them to only allow construction that's explicitly mentioned in the governor's order. This is coming from the mayor. And so it's not a workaround of us going, hey, we've been making efforts, but even I believe some of the people we've been working with at the staff level are getting told no, even though they recognize there is some validity in our claims. And I regret to say we do not have a big showing of friends on the council. Not to say we have enemies, because I don't believe we have that either, but they had a pretty good turnover in this recent election, and basically 2 of the people that bounced out were our, as well as the mayor, were our allies that had usually spoken up for us and worked in our favor. With the nature of Camas, to some extent, there's either a little bit of some pushback against our industry, but there's also maybe more of just a kind of an agnostic viewpoint from some of the councilors, so they don't want to ruffle feathers. So that's where we're working from politically. I just want everybody to know that we are working on this. It's not as simple as Clark County, where we went through the councilors to get some stuff done, unfortunately. Having said that, Jamie has been kind of the leader on working in Camas, and I know he may have some information for everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ryan. I think he's exactly right. The intelligence that we've received, it's basically this is a decision directly from the mayor, and has followed down through that way. It's unfortunate that this mayor was elected in a write-in campaign, primarily against the public pool that was out there, and from what we can see from sort of the outside, it's, clear he doesn't have a very good handle on how local government works, and sort of how all of the players are sort of interconnected with one another. But with that being said, had a good conversation with the city attorney early last week, and he effectively said that the city staff would look at exigent circumstances, I suppose, for lack of a better word, on a case-by-case basis. So, for instance, if there's a house that's just needing that final inspection to get closed, they would take that under advisement and potentially let that one through. But with that being said, we have followed up with, or I have followed up directly with a couple of the former elected officials out there in Camas, as well as some existing city councilors that we have a good relationship with, and the city attorney, again, to point out that Camas is really the outlier, not only within the Clark County region specifically, but on a statewide basis as well, and that they should really be following the governor's exemption list to, at a minimum, allow to prevent the spoliation, which I equate to waste, or prevent damage, and also to protect the safety of the sites. Should we have this need to go a little bit further and close stuff for essential workers, again, my advice right now is that's really on a case-by-case basis, and hopefully we've made the case, and Camas will start reversing direction here before we get word from Olympia.
And I wanted to highlight one other thing. Thank you, Jamie. I would encourage you, I will send out, it will be included in the email after this to you guys with some links. I have included a form letter. Basically, it's just the form. It doesn't have any of the content, as well as talking points. This has to come from their voice, not a form letter. It's not going to work, to the councilors and the mayors. And when I'm not asking for you or your subs, please, that's not what we're shooting for here, because that's not going to work. That's where the pushback lies, I believe, a little bit. So what it would be is asking your customers, whether they just, they're just trying to move in, or they want, or even if they just want some progress, right? They know they're not going to move in, but they want to be able to get that to weathered in, right? So the fact is, when we are able to work again, you're farther down the road, because, they're on timelines too. So I would encourage you that if you're working in Camas, please reach out to your customers with that information and ask them to send a letter. All the information is contained in that talking point list, as well as the form letter has, who you email it to and all that stuff. And it's already, got the header and it's already addressed for you. So I would really appreciate that. I think that's our best effort, our best way to go about this. And so that's kind of where that stands. That's the effort we're doing there. We may ask for that for the other jurisdictions. That's just kind of a last resort. We don't want to. We're trying to work with electeds or the staff that we can. And unfortunately, it's getting a little bit more leeway in time, because the fact is, communications back and forth is very stunted right now, I would say. And so it may be we reach out to them and hear from them three weeks later or 3 days later. So it's not normally, if I waited a week and heard from them, it'd probably be, we know where they stand, and we're gonna maybe go to bat on some of these things, but I don't believe that's the case. This is just a lack of real-time communication because of the situation we're in. So I am giving them benefit. We're giving them, I think Jamie is too, but we're giving them benefit of doubt to kind of have a conversation with them first, rather than try to put the pressure on to some extent. And I guess I wanted to make sure, because some people have asked about this when they've called. One of the other things is too, in some of these jurisdictions, they are kind of nod winking it. Some of the ones that are more prescriptive, and like Jamie said, it's individual projects. So we don't want to come in to some extent guns a-blazing, or make it a public conversation, and then automatically, if we don't get what we want, it goes to a full shutdown. So that's kind of what we're doing. I've been trying to reach out to them. That's where Clark County was. We were kind of looking at pushing them a little bit harder, and then we knew what was coming down, and so we kind of stepped back. So just to give you guys kind of a heads up of what's going on there. But I'd love to answer any questions, or I'll speak for Jamie. He'd love to answer any questions too, for any of like the local jurisdictions or anything you have there, any specifics. Maybe I can answer them or tell you what others have said or noticed.
Yeah, Ryan, could we talk a little bit about permitting? Some of the local jurisdictions are handling permits during this time. Some of them are just processing permits that were submitted prior. I've been trying to lean on the jurisdictions that we are working in to try to see that it's going to be a pretty big problem if they don't intake permits during this time frame.
Yeah, and I think the biggest one is Camas, because they're not really doing anything in Washougal. I've let them know, and that's what I would encourage you as a builder. If you run into a jurisdiction, some of these jurisdictions, like I said, they're not giving guidance. Right? They're saying they gave guidance 3 weeks ago, and they're not updating it, and they have not told me any different. And so they're taking permits in, but they're not telling us if they're working on them or not. I have let the ones know, Clark County, and others know that, there's going to be an onslaught if they don't, right? When we start to go back to work. And the fact is, if they take permits in, they can keep their employees working. Those permits have value to them, for them, obviously monetary value, as well as the fact it keeps work for these people to go. I know Ridgefield, that was one of the things when I met with Claire, with Ryan, if he's on too, we met with Claire, and that's one of the things that Ryan brought up, and she recognized that. She said, yeah, I get it. We, if our pipeline runs dry, we have to have stuff in there, because she doesn't want to lay her workers off too. We know what happened the last downturn, what happened. We're still paying the price for that in understaff or staff that does not have the institutional knowledge, right, or history. So that's where we're going for that. That's part of the conversation I'm going to emphasize again with Camas. I think Jamie has as well. But Camas, unfortunately, is kind of the one for all of this to kind of totally shut down. I know Washougal was taking permits by appointment only. I have not received a follow-up. I reached out there, not heard anything. But when I reached out to the mayor today, I'm going to ask what their status is as well. But I thank you for bringing that up. That was something I wanted to mention. I totally slipped my mind.
Yeah, and then I sent you an update from La Center that I just got this morning, because I've been working on that, just trying to get permits flowing, and they just said we're working on the idea. But in addition to that, and maybe you and Jamie could take a look at what I sent you after the meeting. There's a new form that they just came up with that may allow some construction work to continue. So you could take a look at that as well.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, thank you, Jared. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'll take a look at it. And actually, Jamie and I have a call scheduled after this. So yeah, that's something, especially if they get in a little form. It's been a little bit of a black box or a black hole over there, no responses. So we had nowhere to hang our hat on, right, or to go with. But if they've got some documentation, that'll make it easier. And I think I mentioned in Vancouver, I'm hoping to hear back from Councillor Hansen today about his conversation, how that went with the city manager. If there are no questions regarding any of that, basically, I wanted to include some time for you guys just to say whatever you want to say, ask questions generally. If you're running into stuff, what you're seeing on the ground. I think informing each other is very valuable right now. I can tell you a lot of the questions I've received or the calls I received from some of you has informed later calls. So to some extent, for me, it's just helpful to see what you guys are seeing on the ground, because I am not on the ground at all, for the most part. And like I said, a lot of the jurisdictions are not being proactive of communicating what they're doing. Some for good reason. They're just kind of nod, winking. And so there's no formal announcements.
One of the things we're trying to do at BIAW, Ryan, is we're trying to put together these protocols that let us move forward, that are not going to be impossible to unwind when this is done. Because one of the things we worry a little bit about is getting the state agencies involved with it. Then all of a sudden we end up with a legacy safety officer on every job for some protracted period of months. So, we want to make sure that the cure isn't worse than the disease by the time we get done with this thing. So that can be a little problematic. So we're trying to be very careful with what we set up there. And, when you're doing this one-sided, it makes it a little difficult with those folks. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that we're very cautious about setting up things that could potentially turn into more regulatory issues downstream of this whole thing. So.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tracy. And what I will do, I will include the document we're working from, the BIAW document. It's a public document now, the kind of the framework you guys are talking about of, what we can do to try to stay safe and what we commit to.
Right.
So I will include that link that's going to go out to all of you after this. If any of you are on and you did not register, that's fine. No problem at all. I expected that this might have got tossed. This links got sent around. Please send me an email, ryan@biaofclarkcounty.org, so I can make sure you get the information from this meeting. I did want to highlight something else. All the stuff we've talked about, at least the state level and guidance from the state, as well as information webinars that are done very, very well. I'm very impressed with what BIAW has done regarding the CARES Act, unemployment issues right now, the small business loans, as well as some of the stuff we discussed today. They've got a couple different webinars. If you go to their BIAW site, it's there, but the easiest way, like I mentioned, is go to the COVID-19 link on BIA of Clark County. It's listed there. Andrea's updating that regularly, so it'll take you right to the page. Sometimes those have been hard to find on BIAW's page. So they basically record them. They include the collateral and materials from the event itself, like the slide deck, so you can look at it all there. You can look at the slide deck while you review the full video, Zoom video, just like this. So that's there for you. I would highly recommend it, especially about the CARES Act and the small business loans and unemployment. There's a lot of moving parts. It's very unique. Some of it is very counterintuitive, like the fact that you may not qualify under state unemployment, but under the CARES Act you do because you're self-employed or other things, but you still have to apply through the state, since that is the mechanics or mechanism that allows you to go through that process. I'm not sure if any of you are in that boat, but I recommend you look at that video. It answers a lot of those questions, and they actually have people from the state unemployment department that are speaking and some of these other things that are well versed in this stuff. So you're getting it from the horse's mouth, and there's some very valuable questions there. Not interpretation from me or someone else. You're getting it right from them. So I definitely recommend that. I had a few questions here on the registration people asked. One of them was kind of what do we see for the future of price reductions, material costs, impact fees reduced, going forward, to basically stimulate growth. I don't have any information of that. I doubt I would, even in the best of circumstances. But even in the circumstances now, I can tell you most economists don't even know what's going to happen. There's just too many moving parts right now. I know we want reduction on impact fees, maybe some other permits and stuff like that in the jurisdictions. I could tell you that probably is not likely because they are going to be hurting very much for income and revenue as well. So I don't imagine that, but that is the hope. Once this evens out a little bit and it's not so chaotic, we can have a discussion about what the future looks like. But right now, people aren't even talking about the future, especially at the governance level. Let's see if there's any other ones. I think I answered that.
You guys, just quick, a little bit off topic, but kind of like what you were talking about a minute ago. The PPP loans, have you guys, has anyone had much experience with those?
I've heard a lot of complaints, and yesterday there were two people in my circle of influence. Joseph Irons up at Seattle received his PPP loan for a significant amount of money through his lender, and I wasn't familiar with his bank. Another gentleman that I know in a food service industry got a pretty decent loan. We applied as well just for the heck of it, and we used Umpqua, and all I get is flowery little letters saying we're working on it. So yeah,
we got ours approved. We were kind of one of the I guess the test cases with Riverview, and went through their process, and we did get approved finally. But I went through it like 3 or 4 times with different financials and different equations. I guess if you use just the I think they're in the 941 numbers. Yeah. Sorry, someone just came in. So with the if you just use the 941 numbers, it works a little bit cleaner. But you can also put in like your your health insurance, your retirement stuff, and if you do that, it makes it a little more complicated. But it did go through. So, and there's another program too that may be of use. I would encourage everyone to try to get a PPP loan because it can be forgiven. But also there's a program through the state unemployment office called the Shared Work Program. I don't know if you guys have used that before, but what it does is allows you to put your guys on partial unemployment, but not full unemployment. So they don't have to go look for work. What they can do is it supplements it. You can't talk right now. Sorry. So yeah, that's a good program though.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Eric. Yeah, that actually I think it's the first webinar that BIEW did. The person that from unemployment talked about how, I mean, it's a great program, the shared work program, but there's some nuance to it. And he talked about and explained how you want to use that and stuff. And the other issue I know some of you, Mike and you and I have talked about and stuff is when do you want to do it? Do you want to do, the unemployment now and get the reimbursable, loan or the forgivable loan to keep people employed under the CARES Act or whatnot like that. And that is individual to each one of your businesses. There's so many moving parts on these different opportunities and programs that you need to do individually. Having said that, that webinar was very good to give you direction on which probably you should look at. I mean, by the different moving parts, you can kind of come to it right, just leave that webinar. So I'd definitely recommend looking at that sooner rather than later. These are programs, the federal financed by the feds as well as the state one. There's a state loan program of, I think it's only like $5 million though. So that's going to go away really quickly too, that they're going to burn through. It's a state, very low interest loan. And I think there may be some forgivable parts of it. I can't remember. It's just released last week by Governor Inslee. But you want to look at those, and yeah, for PPP and stuff like that, you want to look at that. I do know there's two bills, one from both in the House, I believe, one from a D and one from an R, but they're basically the same thing. That the idea is to kind of expand the PPP and have it a direct-to-business transaction. Part of it, the problem I think some of you are recognizing is they're funneling them through lending institutions and only a number of limited lending institutions. And most of those people are at capacity for their ability to lend. And so they're cutting off or they just can't process them fast enough. So that's a known problem. And I know the politics. There's so many reasons you could understand how it got that way, but bank lobbyists. So there is other solutions out there. There's a lot of talk that there's going to be a follow-up from the feds. If I hear anything about that, if we see any movement on that, we're going to let you guys know. But it's a bipartisan voice that's calling for something as a follow-on to what the CARES Act is. So I will keep you guys in the loop on anything we hear about that. But it's not a rumor. There is actually bipartisan people working on actual language for that right now. There's any other questions? I got one here. Why is the sky blue? I can explain that to you. As a kid, I asked, but I don't think we want to go down the physics of, the makeup of the air and prismatic coloring. But Tracy loved
Hey, Ryan.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan and Jamie. The only other thing I'd add is just if we are looking down our crystal ball, I think it's fair to say that we're looking at the May 4th order likely getting extended from Inslee. So again, it's really imperative for us to continue our efforts to try to convince Inslee to reverse course on the construction matters. But also just in the case that a second wave of this pandemic comes back to the West Coast in particular, I think, part of setting up these protocols now would be sort of a hedge against another wave downs be forthcoming. And I think we can't stress again the importance of trying to adhere to whatever the localities have adopted thus far, so we don't put ourselves in a bad light while those efforts.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, thank you for saying that, Jamie. Yeah, this is what Tracy is working on, what Jamie kind of put together, and what Tracy's working on at the state level, along with Greg and everybody else. It's a long-term solution. This is not to get us back to work now. I think most people involved know that, as Jamie mentioned, I mean, this could be extended now, but it could come back to us, or we may be under some sort. Most likely, most experts see, we'll be under some sort of restrictions, for the population as a whole moving forward for the foreseeable future. So they're working really hard to come up with a solution that is long-term but still allows us to work, because a short-term win now in the long run could hurt us if we don't get it done right. So I appreciate the work that Jamie and Tracy and everybody's put into it, because we got to get this one right. We definitely have to get this one right. Otherwise it could be a long-term, not only for our industry, but an economic burden for society, or at least our local communities as a whole, if we don't get this right. So I really appreciate all the effort that they put into it.
Hey, Ryan, I've got to get a big shout out to you and Averly and all of our staff. Andrea, for the top-notch job you've done, the folks at BIAW, everybody that we've got on working the back channels in these things and that are actually doing the heavy lifting. There's been a lot of sleepless nights with some folks that have worked really hard on this, and it's just gratifying to know that we have top-notch professionals backstopping us all. That, you know, we don't have a lot to do in our industry since many of us are practically shut down, but it's nice to know that you guys are coalescing all of these resources together and putting those together on the website in a format that makes it easy for our members to grab those resources. So anyway, good job to all the folks at BI and BIAW for all their hard work.
Oh, thank you. I did want to, before we ended, I did want to say a special call out to Andrea. As you mentioned, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of information on that page she put together, and the layout is absolutely readable and understandable. You can find everything at a drop of a hat. Her, I, others, all of us, I'm sure you guys have, look at BIW, and they're doing a good job too. They're focused on other things right now. Just straight up, they're trying to inform a whole membership with webinars and stuff, but and state stuff and other states and other jurisdictions. That page is probably one of the most readable pages regarding COVID that I have seen. I'm really impressed with what she's done. And I refer to that. First, I go there before I look at other sites to see what she's got on there, because it's easier to find than crawling through deep sites. So I just want to say thank you to her, because the stuff that I provided, yeah, if she didn't put it in a readable format, it would have been worthless. So I appreciate it.
She's a rock star. We're lucky that we have her.
Hey, I just want to echo Tracy's thoughts there, Ryan, to you and all of the staff there here in Clark County. Fantastic work these past few weeks. You guys have done a marvelous job, all of you. And Tracy, please pass on to the state as well. BIAW has really stood up and at least had a message that's clear, and you're trying. You, as the state board, you guys have done a lot of hard work, and we sure appreciate it. It's been wonderful to have this voice for our industry.
Well, it is an uphill battle, but if we don't look out for each other, no one will. And we are always the low-hanging fruit. And I think that I see the specter on the horizon of Christmas future, and that'll be a legislative special session. And I've had some candid conversation with some legislators, and they are going to look at some creative ways to claw back some of this money that they've not only lost, but they're having to pay out. So I think if we think we're on a wild ride now, wait until that legislative special session kicks in. Not much we can do about it except continue to tell the story to any legislators that we have a personal relationship with, that small business is kind of the backbone of this economy, and you can't increase egg production by strangling the chicken. So I think that's a story we need to keep telling. And on all of your behalves, I will do that every chance I get.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments to wrap this up? Well, if not, I will be sending out an email. I've got to update a few things on it, because I may have some answers for some of the questions you had, or maybe to put some more information now that we've had this conversation. So I will get that out to you probably by lunchtime here in the next hour. So that will go out to all of you. Once again, as a reminder, if you are on this and you didn't register, please send me your email address, ryan@bia.clarkcounty.org, so I can get you this information as well. And we will be having one of these next week as well. This actually started from Aaron and Elizabeth with the Remodelers Council. They wanted this last week. We put it together, and it went so well that they decided we should probably expand it to everybody to really move forward with this. So, and Dave. So, it was actually Mike Kinnaman's idea. He had actually asked for it about a week and a half ago. So that's where it all started. But the idea is to do these every week. It could be very informative, or we might not have anything. I don't know, but I think we want to keep this on the schedule so we can have these discussions. and like I said, I do want to hear what's happening on the ground. If you're not comfortable or it just didn't come up right now, feel free to call me directly or email me and let me know, because you guys are my eyes and ears, and it makes it easier when we're dealing with jurisdictions if I know what's actually happening rather than hearsay.
Sounds good. Be safe out there, everyone.
Be safe. Thank you so much for your time this morning, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
See you later. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.